Algebra 1, Lesson 69, Factoring Trinomials. I'm going to skip the book example and go straight to here. So in order to understand factoring trinomials, we need to understand FOIL. If we don't understand FOIL, we are not going to get this. So quick recap of FOIL. We have two polynomials that are being multiplied, and FOIL stands for firsts, outsides, insides, and lasts. All right, so FOIL, firsts, outsides, insides, lasts. Wow, that looks really weird written vertically. Okay, so let's start with the firsts. We'll use a different color for these. We'll make the firsts blue, the seconds will be green, the insides will be purple, and then we'll make the lasts orange. Yeah. So blue, green, purple, orange. Starting with the firsts. So the firsts are going to be x times x. All right. So x times x is x squared. That's my first. Now let's go with the outsides. The outsides are going to be these two outside numbers, -2 and x. So outsides, right? X and -2, -2x. Now let's talk about the insides. Inside numbers are going to be these two, +5 and x, because they're on the inside. 5 and x gives me +5x. All right, and then the lasts are going to be these last numbers. So remember, first was x and x, the last number is 5 and 2. So 5 times -2, -10. Last thing I'm going to do to simplify this, to bring it all together, I'm going to combine like terms. So I look and I see that -2x and 5x are like terms. They combine to become +3. And then my final answer is just going to be x squared plus 3x minus 10. Now, should all be review. This is multiplying through distributive property or FOIL method. Now, what we're going to talk about is called factoring trinomials. What factoring trinomials is the exact opposite of this. So instead of starting off with this number, we're going to start off with this number, and the goal is to turn it into this. So factoring is kind of like the opposite of multiplying, in that, you know, if we were to take a starting number, like 10, and then we were to multiply it by 5, we would get 50. And then if we were to take 50 and then divide it by 5, we would get 10, right? So this multiplication and the division, opposite actions. So we start with the number, we change it, we do the exact opposite action, we get back to where we started. That's our goal here. We started with this number, we wrote the trinomial. Now to learn how to factor the trinomial, we need to do the opposite action to turn it right back into this number. So let's talk about that. When it comes to factoring trinomials, we always want to write them in descending order first. Descending order being the squared exponent, the 1 exponent, and then the whole number, or x2, x1, x none, as I like to remember it. So once it's written in this descending order, I know that it's going to be broken into 2 sets of parentheses. And I want to try to undo this foiling method, right? The hardest part is going to be the insides and the outsides. However, the first will be pretty simple, because the first is quite typically almost always just going to be x squared, which will factor into x and x. So I look at this trinomial, I see that the first term turned into x squared. So that means the first term of each of these is also going to be x and x. So the first, which is blue, done, got it. Now let's talk about the signs. There's a couple of special rules for these signs. And they have to do with this last sign right here. So if the last number is negative, what that tells me is that both of these signs are going to be different. No, wait, let's make this orange, because this comes from the last times the last rule. Now, if this last symbol is negative, these are both going to be different signs. The reason why I know this is because in FOIL, the last times the last. If we have a positive times a negative, we're going to get a negative number. If this was a negative, if we have a negative times a positive, we're going to get a negative number. However, if we have two of the same numbers, negative times a negative, then the last number would be positive. If we had a positive times a positive, the last number would be positive. So we notice that in this FOIL method, the first term and the last term don't change. They remain the same all the way down to the trinomial. So if this last term is negative, then I know that negative number was achieved by multiplying a positive and a negative. It doesn't matter what order I put them in. I could have put the negative over here, I could have put the positive over here. But by using blue and orange, I figured out the first term, and then I've also figured out the signs. Now, the last part, the hardest part, is figuring out the outside and the inside, or the OI part. Figuring out what goes in these blanks. Now, to do that, we're going to use two processes. We're going to look at the last term, which is the 10, and we're going to find possible factors of 10. So I look at 10, and I'm going to list all the possible factors I can think of. So possible factors would be 1 and 10, 2 and 5. And you know what? That's it. That's all I've got for 10. 1 and 10, 2 and 5. So so what I know is these two numbers have to be a combination of 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Now, the way I figure out which numbers they are is I look at this middle term, right? Now, if you remember, we had to add like terms here to get 3x. So, and then you'll notice that the coefficients of both these x terms match these two numbers. The positive 5 matches this x, the negative 2 matches this x. So these two numbers have to combine with these signs to create that middle number. So if I look at this, and I'm just looking at the factors of 10, is there any way that I can put negative 10 and positive 1 to equal positive 3? No. What if I make 10 positive? What about positive 10 and negative 1? They will never add up to positive 3. However, 2 and 5 work. What if I make the 5 negative? If I do negative 5 and positive 2, will that add up to positive 3? No, that actually adds up to negative 3. But if I make 5 positive, and then I make 2 negative, negative 2 and positive 5 add up to positive 3. So I know that this is correct. So that's the first example. Now, one thing I didn't mention about the signs is there's 3 different ways that we can determine the signs of these trinomials. Let me see if I can come up with an example very quick for you. If we have x squared, hold on, I'm going to pause. Okay, so I've got 4 examples, and I'm going to explain all of the sign rules right now. So with all of these examples, starting off, we're going to start with our 2 parentheses. And all of our examples start with x squared. So the first terms are going to be x on each one. Now, when it comes to figuring out the signs, these are going to be all 4 of the rules. So the first rule is if the first rule that we already saw was that if the last or actually, sorry, I guess there's really only 3 rules. The first rule is that if the last sign is negative, like we see in both of these cases, then the signs are going to be opposites. So one will be positive, one will be negative, right? So if the last sign is negative, one will be positive, one will be negative. Now, notice the middle signs here are different, so that doesn't change anything. If the last sign is negative, one positive, one negative, all right? This middle sign does not affect that. Now let's go back up here where the signs are positive. So if the last sign is positive, we know that both the signs will be the same, but we don't know if they're positive or negative. What tells us that is the middle sign. So if the last sign is positive, I know they're both the same, and then I look at the middle sign to tell me what that is. So positive means same, middle means negative. Same, negative. So negative, negative. This one, positive, same, middle sign, positive, positive, positive. So that's how the signs work. If the last sign is negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Doesn't matter, all right? Doesn't matter what this middle sign is. Now, if the last sign is positive, we look at the middle to tell us what the sign is. So same, negative, same, positive. Now, for fun, let's go ahead and finish solving these polynomials, and that'll be the end of this video because it's already going a bit long. Let's, if we notice, the last term for all of these is the number 12. So let's find the factors of the number 12. 12 could be made by 1 times 12. It can be made by 2 times 6. It can also be made by 3 times 4. And that's it. So let's look at this first trinomial. We figured out that the first terms were x. Same negative, figured out it was minus minus. So now we have to figure out what numbers here will add up to become negative 7. Negative 2 and 6, nope, that's negative 8. Negative 3 and 4 work. So negative 3, negative 4, they both add up to negative 7. This is the correct factorization here. Now let's go over x. The same problem, the only difference is this is a positive, and now we have positive, positive. So now we figured out x and x, we figured out positive, positive, we factored the last number 12, now we have to find two numbers that add up to positive 7. In this case, positive 3, positive 4. So 3 and 4. Now let's go to the next one. We have x squared, x and x, last sign negative, so positive, negative, doesn't matter which order they go in, and then they add up to negative x. Now, remember this has a coefficient of 1, so negative 1. So what numbers can fit in here that will create negative 1? Well, if 4 is negative and 3 is positive, negative 4 and 3, negative 1. Now, on all these examples, I use 3 and 4, but just understand it could have been 1 and 12, or it could have been 2 and 6. So all of them are possible. It's not always 3 and 4 or the middle numbers or anything like that. There's no rule telling you which group to use. You just have to find which one fits. So then last one, we had a negative, but this one adds up to a positive instead of a negative. So what we'll see here is in order for the positive to work, 4 will have to be the positive number, 3 will have to be the negative number, because 4 minus 3, positive 1. So that's how the signs work, and that's how they change your answers. If you have any questions, let me know on Moodle, and I will see you in class.